right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another week of webinars here at Route Consultant. This particular webinar focuses on the emergency medical services industry, or EMS for short, as we call it. I'm Leah Nelson. I am part of the education team here at Route Consultant. I usually focus on the financial and analysis aspect of the different businesses and industries that we look at here at RC. But today, we're all coming together to learn more about the EMS industry and answer any and all questions that you've got. Before we get too deep into it, I do want to say we've got kind of some nasty weather here in Nashville. Really, really stormy day. I think we've got a clear hour or two, but if we have any connectivity issues or any thunder in the background, I do apologize in advance. If you've never joined us for a webinar before, we do have a certain format that we follow. So first, we'll cover the content of the week and a couple of updates. And then at the end, we'll leave time for a Q&A session if anyone has any outstanding questions. The questions can be pertaining to today's topic or anything related to the EMS industry. So it does not have to pertain to today's topic, or it can, whatever you'd like to do. We're here to answer really any and all questions that you've got. And if you're watching this on YouTube later on, if you're not live with us right now, since you won't have the opportunity to ask any questions live, please reach out to us at info@routeconsultant.com for any questions that you have about the EMS industry. Or feel free to join us on next week's webinar live. We do them at the same time and day every week. So you got those two options there, info@routeconsultant, or join us live next week. Also, speaking of questions, kind of format-wise, if you do have a question at any point during the webinar today, make sure you're dropping them in the Q&A section at the bottom of the window. If you put your questions in the chat function, I probably won't see them, unfortunately, so they probably won't get answered. So if you do have a question, do put it in the Q&A at the bottom of the window so I can see it and we can get it answered. So if you've joined us before, you know that Hans is our resident expert here for the EMS industry. If it's your first time with us, Hans has been working in the EMS industry, the space, for quite a while. He's been running his own EMS business, as well as helping other people start their EMS business and helping them, run it and be successful. So if you'd like to learn more about Hans and his background, we do encourage you to visit our YouTube page and our first EMS webinar that we did a couple of weeks ago to get more information on his background. We also have all of our EMS webinars posted on our YouTube page if you just want to get more information about the industry as a whole. So we'll go ahead and jump into it. Today, we're going to be chatting about the key elements of an EMS contract, who you can have a contract with, the terms of the contracts, really everything you need to know. So with that, we'll go ahead and welcome on Hans.
All right, I am here. There we go.
Hey there.
How are we? Let me fix my collar.
Yeah,
How are you, Leah?
are going too. Good. Perfect. Well, excited to chat about contracts this morning, or afternoon, I guess it's not morning, but chat about contracts, learn everything we need to know. So we'll just jump in and just kind of start with, who you can have as an EMS operator, who can you have a contract with?
Well, first, let me say we are definitely going to be in the zone today because you and I are matching.
We are. We really are.
Yeah, we got the page on. So this is meant to be for everybody out there. This is going to be a great webinar.
Yes.
We're going to get it going. So, yeah, who can you have a contract with, right? One of the main people that EMS companies like to get contracts with are hospitals. That is huge, right? Because hospitals always have problems with discharging patients. So if you have a patient that's already discharged, the one thing is to help that hospital do a quick turnaround. So obtaining a contract with a hospital is key to a lot of successful EMS companies. And of course, nursing homes are great as well. You want to get contracts with nursing homes, hospitals. You can even get backup contracts for 911 services if you want to provide ALS service, right? So the way that works is a lot of times a bigger company like an AMR, American Medical Response, they will service the 911 department for certain counties or cities. You can actually get a contract with those bigger ambulance companies to run their backup. So let's say AMR is a little busy, they can automatically dispatch you to a call that they originally were dispatched for. So now you're getting a contract to run backup services for the bigger ambulance companies if you're not that big yourself to, obtain a contract to handle all the 911. So hospitals, nursing homes, bigger ambulance companies, you could get contracts with the county to do all their parks and, recs, events, concerts, big concerts and stuff that are going on in that city. So those are a few examples of some of the key contract holders that you want to get involved with or get contracts with to, hopefully help you build a successful EMS company.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all good ones. I know that I actually personally didn't know about the kind of the larger, you could subcontract basically for the larger ambulance companies for 911. That's great to know. So if you were, you do want to get in contact with those people, nursing home, hospital, whatever. Who are you trying to get in contact with? Like who should you, how do you get in contact with those people?
Well, of course, it's marketing is key, right? We talked about this in other previous webinars. You want to know who the gatekeepers are, the people that are actually in charge of transportation.
Mhm.
So no matter where you go, every facility, every provider, they have a certain person that's directed to facilitate transportation for their patients, whether it's a social worker, the administrative facility administrator, or the front desk receptionist. There's always going to be one person involved, and that's the person that you're going to market to. That's the person that you're going to set your lunch and learns with. That's the person that you're going to talk about uh, the the previous transportation providers they have now, how much they're paying, and what services they provide. So again, you're going to look at the gatekeepers, your social workers, facility administrators, charge nurses sometimes. And when you look outside of the hospital setting and you go into the county or the city, there's always someone who's in charge of transportation and they hold various names. There could be event coordinator or event manager, and they're the ones they're going to, facilitate the contract for you to do all their events. So when it comes to that, you want to speak to those people.
Perfect. How do you go about finding their like contact information? Would it be just like on the website of the company or do you have to do a little digging to find out who, the
You
contact
know
information?
what?
Do you just walk in?
That's actually a great question. And I usually walk in because in my oof, 10, 12 years of doing this, I've been very unsuccessful calling, right?
Mhm.
Or if you do call, it's like the person's not in right now. I always tell my mentees, it's great to put a face to the name, right? So you want to put a face to the name that you're seeking, and you want them to put your face to the name of your company. And then you get a better chance to leave an impression. There's a lot of times when I do the face to face, I will actually get a chance to meet the person, even if it's for 2 minutes and they're busy, but I get a chance to, hey, Leah, this is my phone number. I would love to set up a lunch and learn with you.
Mhm.
I would love to talk to you more about the services, or I would love to talk to you about what problems you're facing right now with your current EMS providers and see if I can remedy that problem. So face to face has always been successful for me because you have a chance of meeting that person for either a 1 or 2 minute interaction, and you get a chance to put your best foot forward and make your best impression. So I've never been successful calling and saying who's in charge of transportation because usually you're calling people that are very busy throughout the day. But if you go there, 9 times out of 10, that person will come out to the hallway and at least meet you. So
Yeah.
that's been one of my success, methods.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, just in our kind of our own business, it's so much easier to interact with people when they're right there with you, than like, oh, I'll
Yes.
call them back later, and then you just get busy and you forget. So that's great advice. Great advice. So what does a typical contract look like? How long does it last? What are rate averages, terms? What are you seeing in most typical contracts?
In my experience, the length of the first contract is usually just a year, right? They're going to test you out. They're going to see if they like you. They're going to probably put some contingencies in place if they're not happy with your service, that they are okay to break the contract. And usually it'll have the rates. It'll tell you all the services that you need to provide, and it'll tell you that the time that they need you, and that's key because a lot of people, you want to make sure that you're not signing something that's binding you to be open 24 hours if your EMS office is closed at 6. So you want to not be in a rush to sign a contract because yes, in EMS world, contracts are guaranteed money, right? For the most part.
Mhm.
But I'm never in a rush to sign a contract while I'm not looking over when do you want me available? Especially with your nursing homes and your hospitals, they might want a company that's available 24/7. You got to make sure that you have the staffing uh, there to you know, um, provide the service that they're looking for. So that's one of the biggest things. You want to make sure that the rates are, what you want to get in return, of course. You want to make sure that they're comparable to Medicare and most insurance rates.
Mhm.
But one of the other things that I look at is um, the service. There's been times where when I first got into this business and I was trying to get contracts with nursing homes, and the first nursing home that I got a contract with, I signed a contract stating that I was providing ambulance and wheelchair.
Uh-huh.
But the key thing is insurances do not pay for doctor's appointments. And most insurance people, most wheelchair people are just going to doctor's appointments. So now I'm stuck to this contract saying I'm going to take all their doctor's appointments. And it didn't matter if it was a doctor's appointment for a procedure or just a welfare check. Like, hey, I'm just going to get, a checkup. And most insurances, if not all insurances, they do not pay for just checkups.
Mm-hmm.
So I was binded by a contract like, I am exhausting my payroll, taking people on doctor's appointments that I'm not going to get reimbursed for.
Mm-hmm.
So I really pay attention to that and make sure that if I am providing wheelchair services, that's fine, but I make sure that the contract states that the facility is paying me directly and I'm not trying to build an insurance company knowing I'm not going to get reimbursed.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. As far
Yeah.
as, kind of the terms and everything, how negotiable are they? So say you go to a company, y'all are working on a contract and they say, hey, here's the services we need you to provide, and here's the rates we're going to pay. Like, is that solid or is there room to negotiate?
The one thing I learned from my first billing company was that even Medicare is paying attention to the rates that you send to a nursing home, right? So, for instance, the average Medicare rate is $167. If you're trying to underbid someone else for that contract and you say I could do it for 135, well, Medicare has a reporting act, right? And we have to send uh, what we've made and how much we've charged people to Medicare. So if Medicare is looking at this to say, wait a minute, we're paying you 167, but you can actually survive off of 130 or 120 or whatever you negotiated with that nursing home or hospital. So I advise all my mentees that just keep your rates comparable to Medicare rates. Maybe 167, okay, we could do it for 165. But just keep in mind that Medicare is paying attention to how much you're charging other people, and that's going to gauge what they're going to do with their Medicare rates and what they're going to call the industry standard. So I don't really negotiate. I don't let a facility, talk me down into going to like the 130s or 120s or something that I know I can't manage. And I really pay attention to how it's going to overall affect my numbers with Medicare. So 167, all my contracts are identical to the Medicare rates. 167 to pick a patient up, $6 to $7 a mile, um, per then. What I will do is I will say for the first 5 miles, they're free, but I'm not adjusting on the pricing.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying, kind of? So the
Yeah,
first 5 miles are free, and then after that, it's $6 to $7 a mile, and the regular 167 for Medicare rates, or whatever the Medicare rate is in that particular area.
that makes sense. Yeah, I definitely don't want to sell yourself short. And particularly don't want to sell yourself short
Exactly.
in the long run either, where Medicare, lowers their rates and it bites you in a
Yeah.
couple other areas. So definitely something to watch out for. Absolutely.
And
Um,
that's one, and if you don't mind me saying, Leah, that's one thing that we don't have to worry about, unlike the trucking business, right? So from my experience, that if someone gets a load, they could get underbid by another company. Or I'll take that load to blah 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 blah. And
mhm,
we don't have to worry about that, and we shouldn't even practice that because Medicare is Medicare. Their rates are flat rates, and so as long as we stay with the Medicare rates, we should be fine,
mhm.
right? And you don't want to eat into your profit margin either by trying to get a contract because the truth is, if you sell yourself short, your expenses are going to outweigh your income sooner or later. Because once they know that they got you, and that's a hospital, a nursing home, whoever, for a really low fee, they're sending you all the patients.
Yeah. All
And,
the
and
patients
it's
for a
not worth it.
lower fee.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we got one, let's go. And I'm definitely speaking from experience. This was a process that I had to learn. I literally was a true definition of on-the-job training.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have the route consultants or the hospice cares to teach me what mistakes not to make. And of course, yeah, it was tough lessons learned.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. But hey, that's why we've got you here now is to teach everybody else, everyone on the webinar, the mistakes not to make. So someone's got to do it. And unfortunately, maybe it was you, but you can teach everybody else. So it works out in the end.
Yes.
Right, perfect. So, what are kind of the items you need to make sure are there, with a contract for your business to be successful? So like within like a contract.
Yeah, you want to make sure that there's flexibility.
Okay.
You want to make sure that there's room for, um, like you want to make sure that you meet the expectations. So you want to know clearly on the contract, what are the expectations? Am I doing your wheelchair? Am I doing your stretcher? You want to make sure that's clear, right? Of course,
Mhm.
you want to make sure that the fees are competitive.
Of course.
You want to always do that. And then you want to make sure that you have the right type of insurance. Certain contracts or certain facilities require you to have a certain type of liability insurance. You want to make sure that your drivers and your employees or your EMTs, for better word usage, are covered even when they're outside of the truck, right?
Mhm.
Some nursing homes will not allow you to even get a contract unless you obtain a certain type of liability insurance. And it's a professional liability that covers your patients when they're on the stretcher and they're just in the hallway. And mistakes do happen when employees will drop a patient, but you want to make sure that your employees are covered in that scenario, or even if they're in the truck and something happens. So that is definitely huge, making sure that you have that type of insurance that is appropriate for that facility, right? And it's really not going to cost you too much. You want to make sure that you have the right system in place to bill, whether they're using a POS system or it's a direct, uh, a payment.
Mhm.
Most of the times with nursing homes, no one in the nursing home is taking care of the billing. You have to call their corporate office. So even though you initiated the contract with a particular social worker that's handling that, you want to make sure in plain English and as clear as black and white that on that contract it says where you send your invoices to and who's responsible for making that payment. And if the payment's going to be a net 15 or net 30.
Mhm.
Right? Because their job is not really to make sure you get paid. Their job is to make sure that you transport their patients.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to get into a situation where you've provided too much of service and you haven't received payment for that yet. You want to make sure that's clear. Even before you sign the contract, you want to make sure you get the contact name of the person who pays the invoices.
Yeah.
And what's the turnaround time for an invoice to get paid?
On the invoices, is there a certain amount of time, like if it was in the contract, say I'm just kind of spitballing here, they say, hey, we're gonna pay you a month after the service, or maybe it's a week after the service. Is there a certain amount of time that's too long to get paid after the service, or as long as you know, does it matter?
A month is too long. A
Yeah.
month is way
You're
too
kind of
long. So I
spitballing a
don't
little
think
bit
I
there.
Yeah, I don't think I would do more than 5 days because again, Leah, the bills are going to continue to come, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you can't keep providing service because service is fuel, employees, maintenance. So you need to make sure that 5 days after you send that invoice, that's the maximum.
Okay.
So if it's in that 30, then I'm sending that bill on the 25th day,
Yeah.
right? To make sure that on the 30th day I've received it. And some nursing homes will allow you to pay it, they'll make the payment online, which makes it a lot easier, and so, but for the most part, I would always get my payments through a check in the mail.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
just to keep the systems going, 25 days, maybe even 20 days, I'm sending that invoice to
Yeah.
them.
That makes sense. Let's see, kind of speaking, let's say a contract goes south, on someone's part, on either the company or the EMS company or the retirement home or whatever. Have you seen someone terminate a contract in the middle of it?
Yes, I've seen that on both ends. I've seen that from the facility end when you're not providing the services that you promised them that you would provide. And that's another key thing. When I think about that, I think about how it's always great to have a an extra truck. When you start looking for these contracts, you want to make sure that you have your contingency plan as far as extra trucks available, extra bodies. Right now, I have a gentleman who owns a company and he has a contract and he literally asked me to send them a list of EMS providers that can help him fulfill that contract. Now, he should have thought about that before he got the contract, right?
Oh,
You want to know, and again, we talked about what are the requirements or what is the expectation? So if I have a company that has 5 ambulances, I'm not seeking a contract with the biggest hospital in Georgia. You see what I'm saying? So I've seen contracts terminated because, you know, people cannot keep their word or provide the services that they wrote in the contract. We look at the dollar signs a lot of times in this business rather than the service, right? Because a contract could be very lucrative, right? So
Mhm.
you're like, oh, I'll make it work. I just want this contract.
Make
But
it.
your name goes bad very quickly, and a lot of these social workers and facility administrators, they know each other and they call each other for advice. So you want to be careful on trying to obtain a contract that you're really not ready for,
Mhm.
right? Now I've seen it. I've seen a contract get terminated. I've terminated contracts for, not receiving payment. So again, social workers and facility administrators, their job is to get the patients to these doctor's appointments. So they're calling you and you're loving life. And you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna get paid, but it's 30, 60 days and you have not received payments. So I've suspended contracts and I've terminated contracts for lack of payment. And usually if you have a great reputation or a great rapport with the billing company, they'll get that contract, they'll get that invoice paid. What people don't realize is sometimes Medicare will pay a facility a certain amount of money monthly. So they have money allocated. It's just getting it to the right hands to make sure that you're getting paid, right?
Yeah.
So Medicare basically gives, I think, depending on the size of the facility, $5,000 to $8,000 just allocated monthly for transportation. And that will pay for taking someone to a doctor's appointment via wheelchair. That'll pay for the things that you can't bill Medicare directly.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
now they have this money set aside to just pay people for those appointments that we can't bill Medicare directly for. We can't bill Medicare
Yeah.
for.
That makes sense. Yeah, just got to make sure it's getting distributed to the right places. So to the right providers for the right services. So
Yeah.
as far
And
as,
another
oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say another thing is the KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. We want to make sure that that's in the contract because when it's time for you to renew your contract, you want to make sure that you hit all those key performance indicators, right? So knowing what's expected of you, making sure that you create a spreadsheet or you create some kind of paper trail to show, hey, we've never been late. We've got all your patients to this appointment. We've been here when you called us at the last minute. So maybe those are some of your key performance indicators. Maybe those are some of the things that you could take back to the table now and maybe even negotiate a higher rate because you've shown them that you've met and probably exceeded expectation.
Absolutely. What are some of those common KPIs that you see? Of course, getting there on time and all of those types of things, but are there any others that you see?
Being able to transport at the drop of a dime. So with nursing homes, that's huge, right? A lot of times they'll use two or three ambulance companies, and you want to be there when somebody else drops the ball. So I think that's, in my experience, that's been the biggest thing. Outside of being late, that's like a non-negotiable, right? You can't even say, well, I've only been late 3 times because 3 times to a certain social worker might be three too much,
Hmm.
right? And so being late is just never going to get you a contract renewed. But the one of the major things that I've noticed in my experience is and they'll do this so much, they'll call you at the last minute.
Yeah,
Somebody either gotten really sick or another transportation dropped the ball, and you have to be available. That'll almost guarantee you if you can increase your availability or just that would almost guarantee you a new contract
that's
or
great.
renewed contract.
With the extra truck and having extra bodies on staff or things like that, really all goes hand in hand for sure. And
And
just,
I've even offered. So um, one of the tricks that I've used was, hey, social worker A, I will actually dedicate a truck to you. If you give me this contract, I can have a truck here depending on your call volume, right? So if they're really busy, there's I will make more money parking a truck there and letting a staff stay there. And I've had some nursing homes that will give my staff their own office.
oh, wow.
Like they're just ready to go on call 24/7. So I'll have a 7 to 7, 7A to 7P shift, and they're in that office, and then a 7P to 7A shift. And that way it cuts down the time of them waiting, calling 911,
Yeah.
right? We're there. So I've even done that just to secure a contract.
Yeah. I mean, that's just great customer service too. So,
Yeah.
life-saving customer service, if you will, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. Well, is there, anything else important about contracts that we didn't cover that we, you feel is important to share?
Contracts. are definitely a security blanket, right? With FEMA, you don't necessarily get a contract, but you're kind of contracted with them once they put your name on the provider list,
Okay.
right? And FEMA, like we said, the disaster relief program can make you so much money if you actually get called on there. So you want to put yourself available for any contract. Government contracts are the key. If you know how to establish yourself with sam.gov, there are contracts out there for ambulance companies that pay six, seven figures, easily. And this is where the 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 pros of the contracts are it's guaranteed, right? You don't have to worry about a patient passing away or this. This is what they need. This is how much they're paying. And sometimes those contracts go for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So that's just icing on the cake on top of all the other services you provide. If you have one or two ambulances that were contracted for a particular provider, then you know that that money is guaranteed. Like that's the sweetest thing, right? I think the other thing is that I would tell people just make sure that you're very clear on the service you're providing. Now, I touched a little bit about ambulance and stretcher, but let's make sure that you're clear on ALS or BLS as well, right? You don't want them calling you for an ALS call, but you only have EMT basics on your truck,
Yeah.
right? And now you put yourself at risk, right? For providing services outside of your scope of practice. So contracts can even with that being said, if you have the right service, then that might open the doors for, like we talked about in the past, movie sets where they only really want ALS trucks, right? So getting contracts that specify the type of service, making sure that you're clear on the service that you provide can open doors, but also can save you from getting in trouble
Yeah.
or putting yourself at risk. Making sure that the contracts are clear with the type of insurance that you need for that particular facility is huge. I've seen people, really lose a lot because they've dropped a patient. And we always got to account for the human element, right? The human factor. And we have employees that are tired and they might drop a patient, but you don't want people coming after you personally. You want to have the type of insurance that'll cover you and your patients and your employees, right? So those are probably the key things. And again, not underselling yourself or undervaluing yourself on bidding low, and not too low where your profits are so small it's not really worth the headache for And so I and I've gone through it all. Like everything that I'm telling you is something that I've probably gone through where I'm like, oh, I'll just charge this much because I really want this contract. And you're looking at your bills and your expenses, you're like, this is not even worth it,
You're like, oh,
And so
maybe not the best move.
yeah, yeah. So I've done that and I've seen other companies drop patients, but they had the right insurance. I've actually gotten to the point where I was marketing, and the first thing the social worker would ask me, "What type of insurance do you have? Do you have this insurance? Because we can't even provide a contract if you don't have this liability insurance." And I'm like, "Wow, I didn't know that." I got the type of insurance that just helped me obtain my license with the State Department. But that's just what the state requires. Each individual provider might need something else. So you want to make sure that you do your due diligence before you get that contract and say, hey, is there any special require insurance that I need? And so that way you'll have all your ducks in a row when you obtain that contract.
Absolutely. And I know insurance in any type of, kind of route-based industry is very important. Anything with the vehicle, but particularly with patients and so many employees, that's just of utmost importance. And, I don't know, I think we may have done the webinar on insurance already, or we have one coming up. So I don't remember when that was, but there will be more details on that as well if anyone is watching and interested in that. Perfect. Well, I think it's time to jump into Q&A if you're good with that.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, we got 6.
Yeah, we got
Leland, you're the lucky
questions today. Awesome. So we'll just start at the top here.
Awesome.
So it says, what type of licenses or permits, this says are specifically required in Houston, Texas, but I think we could probably broaden that a little bit and say, on average, how long does it take to kind of get your licenses and permits for an EMS business? If we have, Texas data exclusively, we could maybe provide that, but I think as a general rule, how long does it kind of take to set all of that up for an EMS business?
I've seen the average time is 6 months to a year, right? Some people, go a little quicker. I tell most of my mentees, take your time. This is EMS. We're in the medical field. Even though the average person like myself can obtain the license, I think it's beneficial if you just take your time and really learn the um the importance of what you're trying to do,
Mhm.
right? In Texas, Texas is a certificate of need state. So that process can take a little longer because in certain parts of Texas, you have to get voted in, right? You have to show that there's an actual need. So you need a COI, certificate of need, CON.
And that takes a little bit longer to get.
It can, it just depending on how they work in that particular county. And I think, and I'm not too sure, Texas might be one of those states where you need a certificate of need in every county that you're working. So, like for instance, in Nashville or in Tennessee, once you get a license in Tennessee, you can service all of Tennessee. Same thing like Georgia. Once you get a license in Georgia, I can go to one part of Georgia service. In Texas and in Florida, I know for sure if you get a certificate of need approved in one county, you have to only work in that one county.
That's good. That's a good to know. And to kind of apply for those certificates, you just do that online or
Yes, you're going to apply for it just like you would, and the certificate of need should be attached. And you would want to find out who signs off on the certificate of need. Sometimes the certificate of need is signed off by the other ambulance owners, which is so weird.
yeah, that is a
So
little.
basically, if you want to start a company in Florida, per se, the certificate of need would be submitted, and then the people that would actually vote you in are the other ambulance owners. I hate to sound pessimistic, but what are the chances of other ambulance services saying, "Yeah, we need
Yeah,
more
big a
people"?
portion of
You
our
know?
business. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, you want to find out because some states it's the chief of the fire department. Some states it might be, one of the commissioners or the board of commissioners. You want to make sure that you find out who actually signs off and what's the process to get it signed off on.
Perfect. That makes sense. All right, next we've got this is actually kind of a kind of on the same kind of line here. It says, how do you obtain licensing in the respective states for an EMS transport business? What would be the universal expectations for certification? So we answered, I feel like, quite a bit of that just now. Is there anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, definitely. Every state has okay, so you could actually Google, let's say you wanted to do something in Tennessee, you would Google Tennessee State EMS department or Department of Health. It's always going to be two categories, right? If you Google a particular state and you're looking on how to obtain your EMS license, you're either going to go to that state's Department of EMS or that state's Department of Health, right? So in Georgia, to get your license, you would go to the Georgia Department of Health, and in the search box, you would put ambulance licensure
Mhm.
process, and it would show you the process. And so every state, they might not have the process. I think Georgia's the only one that literally has the step-by-step process, but that's something we have at Rock Consultants. I
Mhm.
know I have that with state. So, people can always reach out to us and say, hey, I need to get the step-by-step process, and we could show them how to do it. But usually it's on the website or in every state's website, they'll have the EMS coordinator. There might be a different name, manager. You might have to contact that particular person and just say, hey, Leah, I'm actually thinking about starting an ambulance company in Nashville. Can you please tell me what the steps are? And they'll tell you, hey, you need to email me at this, and they'll walk you through the steps. So, did that answer that? I know sometimes I could veer
No,
left.
I think that it did. I think that it did. So perfect. And then kind of another question here. How many vehicles, and I think this probably will vary, but how many vehicles would be needed for a larger contract? So you kind of mentioned earlier, 5 may not be enough for a larger contract. Is there a number that is enough, or does it vary?
You know, I would say it just depends on the contract, right? You can kind of know the average truck would probably take 10 runs a day. Runs means drop somebody off and then maybe pick somebody up every time you're doing a run, right? You're looking at the typical truck, and this is pushing it 10 to 12 runs a day. So now you're going to ask that person, well, how many runs are you expecting me to provide service for? And based on what they tell you their call volumes, usually runs ranges between, then that could tell you, okay, I need 3, 4, 5 trucks. I need employees working 8-hour shifts or 12-hour shifts or even 24-hour shifts. But once you collect enough information to see what their actual call volumes are,
Mhm.
then you can say, okay, this is how many trucks I need based on that. But keep in mind, our rule of thumb, here with Hans and Ralph consultants are, if you're running two trucks, then you need a third. If you're running three trucks, you need a fourth. Always keep in mind you need that one backup truck. So no matter what you figured out your car volumes are, make sure you have those reserve trucks, because if you're doing a contract, that means your trucks are running. And in our world, our trucks run usually 6 days a week, but in a contract world, you're running 7 days a week, sometimes 24 hours a day. So maybe having two backup trucks is beneficial, especially if you're servicing a larger ambulance company, I mean, a larger hospital or facility, So again, that just varies on their call volume.
Absolutely. That makes sense. And then I think we've got actually, here we go. We got more coming in as we're reading them. So it says, how do you navigate emergency services as opposed to non-emergency services? Is one better than the other? So kind of what are the differences between, non-emergency and emergency?
I love this question because I get it a lot. And I know that the way we use it is kind of, it can kind of be confusing, right? So here, what we do is we help people get licensed or acquire EMS services, which is emergency medical service, right? But for the most part, most owners in EMS, we only provide non-emergency medical transportation. So we hold a certificate or a license, but we provide a lower acuity of service, right? Because those are where you're going to find the more consistent patients. Those are the patients that are going to doctor's appointments. So I have never done a 911 call in my life, right? I'm doing doctor's appointments. I'm doing dialysis. I'm doing the scheduled person that needs their blood pressure check, just their vitals. We're doing the bare minimum,
Mhm.
right? But we're providing services for people that cannot walk, the non-ambulatory patients. Well, we're just using an equipment that is licensed to do emergency medical service. So, from my understanding, in every state throughout the country, even though we're licensed as a EMS company and we're providing non-emergency medical service, if your employees, for example, they're driving, they don't have a patient, and they see a car accident, by law they have to stop, right? So there's certain elements or there's certain things that we are still required to do. But if you don't contract with a big ambulance company, you should never be doing a 911 call,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so,
If you want to go down the 911 path or not, but likely, I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to.
yes. And another thing is, if you tell someone in the field that you're opening up a non-emergency transportation company, they're going to think that you're starting a wheelchair service, right? We're using ambulances to provide that non-emergency service.
Yeah.
Because again, we have scheduled patients, so it's easier to build out your schedule. It's easier to, build out schedules for employees. And then when you get to that point, and I just advise this to everyone, when you get a consistent flow and you understand this industry, there's nothing wrong with taking on the ALS or the 911.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying? And making your truck now a ALS truck rather than a BLS truck. Provide more services, right? If you've cornered the market in your particular area in BLS calls, then maybe you could add one truck and make it an ALS truck. You can always go down, right? But it's hard to go up. So let's say, for example, if you start a non-emergency medical transport company, a wheelchair van, you still have to go through all the licenses to get your ambulance,
Mhm.
your EMS. But if you start an EMS company, you can still add ambulances under there, and there's no extra license that you have to get.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely, yeah, start higher, service lower instead of the other way around. Absolutely.
Exactly.
And it says, another question here, are these ambulances still emergency vehicles or ambulettes? I've not heard.
Emergency vehicles.
Okay.
And I hear ambulance and they're like wheelchair vans, or they might look like an ambulance. They don't have the lights and they'll have the stretcher
Mhm.
compartment there. So again, the one thing I want you guys to pay attention to also is if you are doing the wheelchair ambulette, they have to send their billing to a broker. So in the country, Medicaid takes care of ambulette and wheelchair. Medicare takes care of stretcher. Medicare will let me bill them directly.
Mhm.
Medicaid says, I'm going to use a broker, and the broker is going to take their fee and they'll dispatch the cost to you and other wheelchair drivers.
Mhm.
And that's where the trucking similarity, when it comes into play with Medicaid, right? Because Medicaid will use providers such as Motive Care, which used to be Logistic Care, and there's another company called Southeast Tran, but they changed their number as well. So Medicaid will send them the patients, and they will dispatch you and me and say, "Hey, I got a patient. We're paying you $100
Mhm.
and a dollar amount, but it's a wheelchair."
Yeah.
Medicare, it's a flat fee, and I can bill Medicare directly. So I want people to pay attention to that big difference as well.
Taken
And
out.
that's why you have a lot of people that are in the wheelchair space getting into the ambulance space because the profits are constantly getting cut.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and cutting out the middleman too, I feel like is always the less cooks in the kitchen, generally, the smoother everything goes. So
Exactly.
pretty much everywhere. So we have another question here. It says, what about gurney and dialysis? That I believe I'm thinking that means maybe pertaining to trucks.
Yeah.
You're still going to use those emergency vehicles for really everything.
I need to meet that guy who says gurney because that means he's old school. But yeah, that's definitely stretchers. He's saying stretchers,
Yeah. Yes.
gurney stretchers. So yeah, that's definitely I want to meet him or her. But yeah, stretcher dialysis, of course, that's Medicare. Um, you want to be you want to make sure that you have a very great billing system. When you're dealing with stretcher and dialysis, that's the majority of ambulance companies. The majority of us, we will use those patients because they go 3 times a week. That's where you're going to make, you know, two, three, $400,000 a month because those patients are going 3 times a week. It's like clockwork. 20 patients in the Medicare field equals to about 115,000 a month that you're grossing and you're netting close to 50, right? 40, 50,000, depending on how you do your bills. So a lot of us in the EMS world, we will go for those type of patients. You have to make sure what Medicare looks at is that there's no fraud being done, right? Because the majority of ambulance companies are looking for those patients. And there's that great line between can somebody walk and do they need a stretcher? So the one thing is, if you're going to go after those patients, I recommend that you have a strong billing company to get your paperwork uh, documented, like your prior authorizations, your medical necessities. As long as you have somebody who's really their sole purpose for working for you is to make sure they get those documents signed by a doctor, then definitely dialysis is the way to go, right? Wound care, anything that causes the patient to need repetitive service,
Yeah.
then you know that you don't have to keep going fishing. You're going to keep, that patient. I've had patients for 6, 7 years on dialysis.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely consistent. If nothing
yeah.
else, really consistent. Um,
And keep in mind that in dialysis, sorry to cut you off,
no.
um, Medicare is the only one that requires, from my understanding, prior authorization. So if you get a Humana patient or a Cigna or Blue Cross Blue Shield and they're on dialysis, they typically pay more than Medicare, and there's not a lot of documentation required.
Speaking of kind of documentation and billing and all those things, we have next question here is it standard to kind of contract out your billing services to like an outside party, or is it best to have it in-house?
I would always recommend that when you're first starting a business or you're first acquiring a business, outsource it. There are plenty of reputable billing companies that um, that charge a percentage, and that's what you want because they don't get paid unless you get paid, right? Stay away from billing companies that charge a flat fee because there's no incentive for them to fight your rejected reports, right? So you want to make sure that you're getting a billing company that's reputable and that you have a personal or you can develop a personal relationship. So keep in mind, some of these billing companies are very big and they're assigning so many people to your account. I want to know who's in charge of my account. I want to speak to Leah on a daily basis. I want to make sure that she knows what she's doing. Again, I'm just speaking from experience, right? Because one day you'll call and say, "Hey, I seen that Mr. Johnson's report got rejected. Oh, Leah's taking care of that. Well, how come I've never met Leah and she's in charge of my account?
Mhm.
My account manager on the billing side, she needs to know intimate details or about my patient's health. So
Mhm.
that way she can fight for those reports. So I would tell anyone the first 2 years, maybe year and a half, 2 years, outsource it until you understand the billing. And like Leah and I talked about consultants, hopefully we will have the Medicare codes for billing, right? And then you can say, you know what? I'm going to send one of my EMTs to billing school, or I'm going to hire a billing encoder and train them to be an EMT. And now we're not paying somebody 5, 7% of $100,000 because that equals to $7,000 a month. I paid bills up to $9,800 a month for billing. And then what I found out was the billing lady told me it only takes her an hour a day to do my billing. But I'm paying for all, the company. I'm paying for all their employees.
Yep.
I'm like, there has to be a better way, right? So 3 to 4 years into our company, we started doing billing in-house,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? So now it's just paying someone hourly and bonuses rather than paying a company 7, 8, 9%.
Yeah, that's certainly
That's
significant.
steep.
Worth it to learn how to do it properly, for sure. You gotta, billing is such an important thing in really any industry, but this one specifically, that you want to make sure you've got it right before you kind of venture off on your own.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen companies try to do it on their own when they first started, and they never were able to open their doors.
Man, that's brutal. So that's
Yeah.
good advice. Good advice. Get a billing company. It looks like we've got one more question for today, and it's not even specifically EMS, but the question is, what are the best routes to start with in the industry as a beginner, kind of between all the different silos that Route Consultant offers? So kind of waste, Amazon Bread, FedEx, what else in EMS? What I'll say to that is it depends on what you're looking for as a buyer, kind of, what you're looking for in a job, what you're looking for in a business that you own. It can vary so much from person to person. So if you are looking to really get in any of the industries, reach out to Route Consultant, info@routeconsultant.com, and we can help you kind of figure out which one's best for you from a financial perspective, from a workload perspective, from really, whatever you're looking for, we can help you figure out which one's best for you. Maybe it's EMS, maybe it's something different. We do webinars for the other silos as well on other days of the week. So I'd recommend starting there. And then, like I said, if you're interested in discussing that more, reach out to the team and we can connect you with that. But it looks like that's it for all the questions today, which is great. So just a couple of things before we wrap up here. Again, if you have any more questions, anybody attending has any more questions, don't hesitate to reach out to the Route Consultant team. If you think of something this afternoon or, next week or whatever, reach out to us anytime. We are absolutely happy to help. We also have, if you're interested in learning more about the EMS space, we do have our EMS 101 course live on our website. It is free, so it's just an overview of the EMS industry as a whole. So you can download that, sign up for that, take that, and then if you decide EMS, you're more interested in learning more, we also have our EMS Virtual Summit course on our website as well. So if you do purchase the EMS Summit, Virtual Summit, it also includes an in-person workshop here at our Nashville office where you can come meet the industry experts, meet the team at Route Consultant, and really just kind of dive a little bit more into EMS and figure out if it's the industry for you. So the EMS 101 as well as the EMS Virtual Summit are both on our website. And then, of course, like I mentioned before, we have our webinars on our past webinars on our YouTube page. So if you search Route Consultant in YouTube, you'll find that. And if you have any questions about the products or EMS industry as a whole, feel free to reach out to us at info@routeconsultant.com, and the team will talk to you and get you settled. So again, thank you, Hans.
No worries. Do you have another question or no?
Oh no, it's the one I just answered.
Okay, cool.
I just didn't hit the button. So I think we're good on questions there. We've got in the chat feature as well about the summit and 101 courses if you need those links, everyone. But I think that's it for today. And thank you so much, Hans, for all the great information on contracts, and we'll see everybody next week.